Every now and again, and very rarely, there are stories adapted for the mainstream media that happen to surpass their original source material. Anyone that's tried reading The Boys comic by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson will easily tell you how bad it is. It's not that the premise from the comics is drastically different from the TV show, they are pretty much the same. Like in the comics, the first few episodes of The Boys are about Huey, a normal, somewhat boring dude living in a world where people with superpowers exist and are treated like celebrities, to the point where entire industries are built around their celebrity status. Food, energy drinks, clothing, video games, movies, you name it. Vought, the company sponsoring the main superhero squad, the Seven, is in on it. Everything changes one day for our main character when A-Train, a celebrity superhero kinda inspired by The Flash, accidentally goes and kills his girlfriend out of the blue. This sends Huey down a spiral of intense depression and anger that leads him to meet our second most important character in the series, Billy Butcher, who uncovers his eyes to the reality of superheroes and how sociopathic they truly are beneath the perfect and virtuous image they portray in popular media. And together with Butcher, a French dude, an Asian girl, a black guy calling himself Mother's Milk, Huey joins this undercover unorthodox group called The Boys, a team of mostly regular people working to bring corrupt superheroes some justice. I get why the TV show absolutely needed to be different from the comics since the source material tackles a completely different subject that wouldn't translate too well with modern audiences not very familiar with comic books. You see, the comic was intended as a jab to the whole comic industry, sort of like a mirror to every trope and stereotype. It wasn't really a good one, and not every joke or critique landed as intended, but at least they tried. Although the comics were a narrative mess, and by that I mean it felt like the authors went on way too many tangents, the boys find themselves constantly in different story arcs that have nothing to do with the main one, where they fight parodies of other comic book heroes that drag on way too long. By the time the main narrative is being pushed forwards again, it feels like an afterthought. On the other hand, Amazon's version came out at the perfect time, and the writers in charge knew exactly how to redesign the core concept by taking a grip on modern culture. Being released for the first time in 2019, right at the start of the decline of Disney's superhero film franchise, the joke was ripe for the taking. Amazon's The Boys not only mocks the modern representation of superheroes in media and culture, it shines light on corporate corruption, modern politics, news and social media manipulation and cover-ups, social elites manipulating the fabrics of society, celebrity culture, the yellow press media that comes from it, and how it ends up spilling over other legit sources of information. And more importantly, the culture of virtue signaling. How every corporate organization becomes more concerned with doing what seems right rather than doing what is right. In other words, like any proper good satire, the show isn't afraid of throwing shade at anybody. Overall, the first season of The Boys was pretty weak, but I blame it on the show trying to stick to the original source material a bit too closely. The real meat of the series starts with season 2, where the screenwriters start taking more liberties. Not only that, they keep building more character to characters that pretty much didn't have any in the comics. Without going too far, Huey is way more likable and interesting in the show. He makes his own decisions, proves to be a critical member of the team on several occasions, and even though he's weak and afraid most of the time, he still stands up for himself. As a matter of fact, pretty much every character in the show is given more dimensions to both their intentions and personality. That's how poorly the comics were written. Had it been a one-to-one adaptation, the whole thing would have crumbled by now. Essentially, The Boys is a show that demanded a lot more creativity and talent than the average Marvel movie to make it work. It's not like it's a series that will redefine the meaning of entertainment as a whole. I wouldn't even call it a masterpiece. Far from it. It's a B plus show at best, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But we gotta recognize how many leaps in improvement the whole thing has taken with every season. In particular, season 3, with the introduction of Soldier Boy. Soldier Boy is probably the pinnacle of the series. He's a corrupt Captain America and the old leader of the Seven before Homelander took charge, whose values couldn't be more regressive. Homophobic, egotistical, narcissistic, he's got every trait imaginable that will get him flame in the pyre that is modern day progressive media. And if we go by the interviews from the show writers, this guy's the biggest backfire I've seen in a while. Soldier Boy feels like he was written in a way that would embody every Gen X and millennials' stranded relationship with their fathers. He's supposed to be the walking image of toxic masculinity, that stupid label that's being parroted around every woke group and internet forum these days. Now, I don't know how different the character is from what they originally intended, but the actor portraying Soldier Boy, Jensen Ackles, refused certain traits from the character that would have put him in a really bad light. Namely, the weird, imposed relationship between him and his young sidekick, Gunpowder. But apparently, Ackles refused as he himself is a father to a young boy in real life. Honestly, more actors need to start speaking up about what they don't want to do on screen. It's thanks to this intervention that Soldier Boy is probably the most popular character so far. His outdated view and commentary on our modern world is taken as a quirky joke, or sometimes a reflection of what most people believe these days. Either way, he's someone that anyone from either side of the political spectrum could believe is real. I think it takes talent to create such a detestable character while making him likable at the same time. Well, more than talent, perhaps a lucky misfire by the writers. Just like Homelander, we're given enough background information to understand why these characters are shaped up to be the way they are, humanizing them a little. And even though you might not like them as people, it gives them enough subtlety to understand where they're coming from. And it's precisely this subtlety that completely goes to shit in the current new season, that is season 4. I'm not gonna address all these news articles about how The Boys was meant to make fun of conservatives all along. It's clear they are all written in bad faith by journalists specialized in gaslighting, lying, and high in their own delusion, thinking, oh my god, they didn't know the show was laughing at them? Oh my god, they are realizing this now? While it's true, seasons 1 to 3 have consistently made fun of conservatives as a whole, the jokes themselves weren't too bad. And anyone with enough common sense and a normal sense of humor can easily laugh at themselves every once in a while. If the roles were reversed and progressives were the target, we all know how wild things will get. Anyways, as an example, the scene with the whole gang going to a Christian festival was pretty funny. But there were jabs at other aspects of modern culture outside of the conservative sphere. A crazy secret super orgy organized by the elite for the elite. Now that is funny for how plausible it could be. You have the Epstein Island fiasco, the P. Diddy parties, real life events that make the whole thing actual satire since they are all based on real life events. And as I said at the beginning of the video, good satire isn't afraid of throwing shade at any group, at least until now. So, what does season 4 do as satire? They take the gang to a conspiracy theory meeting where the show basically breaks the fourth wall and straight up tells the audience to shut the fuck up about any talks regarding pedophilia in Hollywood or child trafficking rings, among other very valid topics. They merge these topics with other silly subjects such as flat earth theory, chemtrails, the landing on the moon, or vaccines causing autism theories. This is a classic tactic used by demagogues to silence any valid criticism. If you pile all of these arguments together in the same bag, eventually society as a whole will think they're all on the same level of stupid, therefore losing credibility and momentum. The show even manages to toss in the accusations against Oprah and Tom Hanks for being on the Jeffrey Epstein list and defends them instead. What the fuck? I have never seen such a blatant message from Hollywood telling to the people to shut the fuck up and fall in line. These motherfuckers have no shame left. It's borderline communist propaganda telling citizens what to think. But my favorite scene is where the Asian lady sees a poster about child trafficking and straight up calls it bullshit. Even though the information on the poster is spot on. It basically says there's a child trafficking ring managed by the elites and the government, while the media and politicians cover it up by labeling it as fake news. And this is precisely what's happening throughout the series. They do have private militias overseas being funded by VOD and the US government to create a new threat where terrorists can have superpowers too, just to justify the selling of the VOD serum to the military. And they use children as old as babies to experiment with the superpowers the serum gives. So the conspiracy theories are absolutely right on this one. And what do the show writers do? They have the Asian lady start lecturing these people, telling them that if they actually care, they be going after actual child traffickers instead of protesting. And their theories are nothing but fairy tales. What the fuck? Are these people retarded? Why are they throwing away their own plot points to lecture the audience? If anything, the Asian lady should have joined the conspiracy theorists right then on the spot. Maybe guide them towards the truth of the matter and far away from figureheads that only want to use them for their own agendas. But what do the show writers do instead? They call it fairy tales. And expect the average American to go out there and pursue real child traffickers. What are you, fucking stupid? You want the average Joe and Jane to simply throw their lives away, gear up some combat gear, buy a plane to Cambodia and go on a blind manhunt? In what world do these people live? These conspiracy theorists are already doing precisely what they should be doing as citizens, raising the alarm, blowing the whistle, spreading around any indications of evidence, and bringing anyone involved to justice. The show deliberately ignores the bigger picture in favor of spreading the writers' political opinions. This is low. This is pathetic. The mismanagement of the show doesn't end there. There's so many decisions that make me question whether someone hijacked the Boys franchise. One of them being the addition of a new character, which of course is the neo-stereotype of a boss black lady. Sage is her name, and her power, of course, is being 1,000 times smarter than white people. She's pretty much in every episode, and for someone being 1,000 times smarter, I have yet to see any of that intelligence be put on display. All of her ideas backfire every single time. There's a point where she manages to corner the entire team, forcing them to toss their weapons away, and at which point there's no way out. The boys are outnumbered, outgunned, and they are facing an enemy led by the smartest person in the world. That should have been the end of the line. All I could think of was Butcher somehow showing up and saving the day. Realistically, it was the only solution. Instead, you have the dumbest action scene in the entire show, where the bad guys get outsmarted like this was a Saturday morning cartoon from the 90s. It's sad to watch. But what's sadder is the way this girl, Sage, is written as a character. Straight up, this is not a character. This is another girl boss written by some fresh out of college gender studies graduate that repeats their victimhood ideology mantra in front of the mirror first thing every morning. There's not a single scene where this lady isn't throwing some commentary on race, racism, and her being a modern woman. It's on the clock and on the nose. Every single scene she's in. Very tedious. And whenever she's not saying anything like that, her whole personality is reduced to being snarky or arrogant towards everybody. This is how you can tell the people in charge of writing her are modern women themselves. I'm not even trying to be sexist, but looking at every single show written by people like this, their ideas of intelligence and strength are reduced to the purest form of self-insertion, like a caricature of who they wish they could be. In other words, fan fiction. I said it before, but in the 4 episodes I've seen so far, I've yet to see any real clever actions performed by this lady. All I see is her losing her composure, calling everybody names, acting arrogant, belittling everyone around her. These are traits you don't see coming from wise people. If anything, this is pure insecurity. It's childish. The fact that she faces no consequences from anything she says or does makes it all even more unrealistic. Moreover, every other character that interacts with her completely loses their own sense of self, and instead they all start acting up in manners that leave her plenty of room to get her way. In other words, again, this is fan fiction. Browse every other Disney Marvel show. All their women are written this way, and no one calls them out for their own stupid writing because they represent the new banner for progress. All I can think of about where all of this is going is the biggest cop-out of the century, where the show writers are gonna justify all of her dumb decisions as being calculated all along. She was failing on purpose. It was all part of a bigger plan to take down the Seven. Sage was a hero all along. Holy shit if they do this. Mark my words, the show is dead. I will have more respect for these motherfuckers if they simply stuck to the character being an egomaniac bitch that ends up getting what she deserved. But we'll see. What else is there to say? You got the white power pamphlets being distributed as racist propaganda too. Man, I'm not even white and I can tell whites in America are being hammered every day with anti-white rhetoric. Or in one word, racism. But guess what? This is nothing but another conspiracy theory according to the shit show. The absolute irony of having a new superhero named Firecracker while calling out the anti-white agenda is nuts. Next level gaslighting. It's like bringing up a black superhero named Captain KFC and then trying to convince the black population that it's all in their heads. In episode 2, there's also this guy with the power to create different copies of himself. And even though that's a really cool superpower that other media have adopted with cool interpretations, because he's a conspiracy theorist, they made him the most pathetic loser imaginable. I don't know how the actor even agreed to play this shit. How did the audition go? Yo homie, come over. We want you to play the most pathetic and disgusting little bitch imaginable by an 8th grader. You ready for it? It's the saddest shit I've seen in a while, and I hope I never see this guy playing anyone else in any other media again. Finally, the credits roll out, and after the cringiest fight scene possible, taking place in a Jewish bar mitzvah, of all places, together with a rock version of their anthem. That's when it all clicked for me, right there. Now, before we get into the "It's the Jews" commentary, I'd like to point out that the previous seasons have had the same Jewish producers, and they were pretty good. So where's the problem now? Where is the infection? Why is everything so heavily politicized in 2024? Of course, it's 2024. And what's gonna happen this year? The US elections. Yeah, I have a feeling the producers have been delaying the show on purpose, just so they can use The Boys as anti-Republican propaganda. Which is fucking hilarious considering how old every actor looks now compared to the very first season. It feels like everyone aged 10 years in the space of a couple of weeks. It's gonna be really weird to pick up The Boys from season 1, get all the way to season 4, and see everybody looking old as shit out of the blue. Like, what the fuck happened to this lady? Anyway, on another side note, I'd like to mention the final scene in episode 3. This is important because I simply couldn't get it. You see, I don't live in North America and I'm not from Europe either. So when the whole anti-woke musical popped up mocking the controversy of the words Merry Christmas, the whole joke went over me. And I will consider myself as someone pretty well informed about the current state of the world. And I still didn't get this joke. So apparently, a few years ago, the neoliberals began pushing for the replacement of the phrase Merry Christmas to Happy Holidays in an effort to make the holidays more inclusive. Now I'll say it again, I'm not American, I'm not European. You know how this movement looks like to anyone outside of this Western bubble? It's the most pitiful, pathetic thing I've seen in a while. Another proof of how easy people have it over there in the first world, that instead of counting their blessings, they get to spend all their energy on creating problems out of fucking nowhere to then commercialize a solution. As an outsider, I'm sitting here watching the show thinking, okay, where's the joke? There's a lot of violence and chaos, but where's the fucking humor? It's just bashing on the Christian religion for 3 episodes in a row. I'm not laughing and I'm not even Christian. This shit is awkward. There's no punchline. Turns out you have to be a Twitter warrior to get it. You have to be at the forefront of all of these made-up controversies, taking in and consuming the fabricated arguments. And they gotta do this because it's election time this year. And the American Democrats believe the whole world needs to stop for the sake of American politics. Who was the fascist again? But anyway, enough conspiracy theories, right? Let's talk about real world issues, since that's what the boys, writers, and producers are preaching to us. And since the show is satire, it needs to be based on real life. So let me give you a few recent real life events that I feel like the series could easily use as comedy fuel. How about making jokes of those Jews that were coming out from the sewers in New York? It was a huge sensation for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden, nothing. Radio silence. Brush under the rug. And when you try Googling for any possible answers, you only get articles covering up the whole thing by calling anyone questioning it as an anti-Semite. I want some journalists going down there in those holes with a handheld camera, Outlast style. And since the writers like bringing up the white supremacy, I want them to bring up why half the billionaires in America are Jewish despite being 2.4% of the population. You know, as a joke. Since we're all joking, right? Sorry, is this too controversial or borderline conspiracy theory? Let's talk about something more real then. How about making fun of Israeli civilians throwing away and destroying humanitarian food aid being delivered to Gaza, while the Israeli police and military just sit and watch? Wouldn't that be fun? I think it'd make for a great gag in The Boys, guys. I think the audience will find it hilarious as Israeli TikTokers making fun of Palestinians in Gaza for being cut off from water and electricity. I mean, look at these people. They look like they're having the time of their lives, dressing up as mothers covered in blood, mourning for their dead children. Or here's another one. Since we can't prove any connections between Hollywood and child trafficking, let's make jokes about Hollywood and child molestation. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Elijah Wood's shocking allegations against the entertainment industry. In a new interview with the Sunday Times, the former child star alleges that pedophilia has been a real issue in Hollywood. He tells the publication, quote, "There are a lot of vipers in this industry, people who only have their own interests in mind. What bums me about these situations is that the victims can't speak as loudly as the people in power. That's the tragedy of attempting to reveal what is happening to innocent people. They can be squashed, but their lives have been irreparably damaged. If you're innocent, you have very little knowledge of the world and you want to succeed. People with parasitic interests will see you as their prey." He goes on to allege that even as an adult in the industry, he has been, quote, "led down dark paths to realize that these things probably are still happening."
Almost every child actor that's made it far in Hollywood has admitted at some point or another that the sexually abusive culture from producers and directors in the film industry is very real. So, what's the fate of people like Dan Schneider, the producer and screenwriter for most of Nickelodeon shows such as iCarly? Nothing. No jail time or investigations, just a slap in the wrist and cover ups after cover ups. When Catholic priests were caught molesting boys back in the 2000s, the whole world went on an uproar, rightly condemning these men, which then pressured the Catholic Church as an institution into going through severe reforms in their codes of conduct. It was all over the news back then. You think journalists were seekers of truth, working to bring justice for the victims of these people? Well, it's all bullshit. Because as soon as child predators turn out to be Jewish, they simply turn a blind eye. Like the New York cases of herpes being transmitted to newborn babies by Jewish rabbis during a ritual called the Metzitza Bebe. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but this is a process where the rabbi cleans the circumcision wound by sucking it with his mouth. I almost throw the fuck up researching this shit. I can find articles dating all the way back to 2004 detailing how Jewish rabbis transmit STDs to newborn babies. And in case you're wondering, nobody in any article I found was ever arrested, even when there were dead babies involved. Now then, dear viewer, before you label me as some sort of anti-Semite, remember, I'm only bringing up recorded evidence in the form of news articles. No conspiracy theories or fake news or shady websites. Only facts, so don't shoot the messenger. But you know what? I think in the spirit of good humor and satire, this kind of fucked up stuff will fit in really well in the new seasons of The Boys. So instead of mocking conservatives and Christians, let's make fun of these cases, which are very real. And with this, I hope the writers and producers can do a better job at portraying the current state of the modern world. Anyway, that's all I gotta say. Thanks for listening. Bye.